guys, how are you doing today? I hope you're doing really, really well. Today I'm going to be making some cake pops with a whispered ASMR voiceover. So here I just have all the ingredients out. So it's a white cake, this vanilla candy coating, which is basically like white chocolate, and I had some sprinkles and some whipped cream cheese frosting. This cream cheese frosting is my favorite. So the first step is set the oven to 350 degrees because the first step to making cake pops is to make a cake. Then you gotta coat the bottom of the pan with a non-stick cooking spray, but I only have one pan. First of all, it's the wrong size. It needs to be bigger. And I mean like one, pan that has depth. And I don't like to get it dirty, so I just use parchment paper. So now you can watch me struggle. I swear, ripping off parchment paper or cling wrap or anything, it just never works well. Even though this is a brand new box of it. So now I'm cutting it to fit the pan. This is my first time making cake pops, by the way, and I'm doing it for a friend's birthday. I thought it would be fun. I love cake pops. Okay, yeah, this is a trick I've seen is if you crinkle up the parchment paper, it makes it a lot easier to fit into the pan, to mold it to the right size. Still a little bit of a struggle though. How about whenever there's like extra footage and nothing to say in this video, I'm just gonna do some trigger words. Because I love repeated trigger words. So, cake pop, 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 cake pop. So now that we coated it, we need to make the cake. So we need water, oil, and eggs, and the cake mix. So 1 cup water, half a cup oil, and 3 eggs. This is a KitchenAid mixer bowl. So in this video, this is my first time ever using this KitchenAid mixer. And the bag fell out of the box. Guys, doing things with one hand is hard. So you'll see this video is all kind of messy. But yeah, so I'm putting it all in the KitchenAid bowl. There's my water. It is clear. notice there's still some clumps of cake mix that weren't getting mixed in. I'm not too sure what to do about that. Okay, make sure then you lock it and then start it back up. And hopefully everything will get mixed up really good. There we go. There we go. Now we're pouring it into the pan we prepared. You can see it's definitely still clumpy. But honestly, I'm not too worried about these being perfect. Like, it's all gonna get crushed up at the end anyway to be turned into cake pops. And there, the parchment paper was falling in on itself. That's the cons of this approach. I know you can't really see it going in the pan, but I did my best. I did my best. And you gotta make sure to get every last bit out of the bowl to go into the cake. Oh, there, you can kind of see it in the reflection. So there it is, after getting every last bit out into the pan. It's kind of messy with some batter on the parchment paper, but it's okay. It's okay. And then we put it in our preheated oven. That's a little oven thermometer because our oven is old and not always accurate. Okay, so yeah, it said for a 13 by 9 inch pan, which is what's recommended, do 34 to 39 minutes. So I just started at that bottom number even though my pan is smaller. And yeah, we're gonna let that bake and check on it later. And in the meantime, we will wash this bowl so that we can use it again later in the spatula and the attachment. So I'm just getting it wet first. Sorry for the weird camera angle. I had to rest my phone on my coffee maker next to the sink. I don't really have a tripod or like anything set up to be able to record things nicely, so I'm sorry about that. I'm just using my Scrub Daddy. Actually, it's Scrub Mommy with dish soap and water to clean the attachment. And the spatula, just trying to get off the excess batter that's still in there before I scrub it with the Scrub Mommy. Scrub it with the Scrub Mommy. We are making cake pops. There, I turned up the gain a little bit because I feel like this is kind of quiet. Hopefully it's not too quiet. And yeah, we're just gonna keep cleaning these dishes as we make our cake pops. You get it all soapy, and then once it was done, and I did check, I wanted to get it cooling. So this was kind of hard to maneuver, but I got out this rack that could allow air to pass under it. But I didn't want to have the parchment paper under it trapping the heat, so I kind of had to maneuver to get the cake off of the parchment paper and onto the cooling rack with plenty of air flow underneath it. So this was kind of difficult, and I was trying to do it with one hand because the cooling rack was hot because I keep it in the broiler part of the oven as storage, and it kind of got baked along with the cake. So finally I was able to flip it over onto the cooling rack, and I didn't want to bother it then because it was hot, so I just let it sit there for about 15 more minutes to cool off. And then it is time to cut off the browned edges so that everything has a uniform, color and texture in the cake pops. So this part was a little intimidating, but I managed to get most of it off. I wasn't concerned with having it be perfect again. What's a little bit of cake crust gonna do to you? Nothing. So I sliced off as thin of a layer as I could, which made for a perfect little mid-baking snack for myself. They tasted good, the little edges. So then I just grabbed a plate to set these on. Well, I got it, as you can see, it's 11 p.m. as I was doing this. I ended up having to stay up pretty late. It took a lot longer than I expected. And by the way, I wasn't really following any recipe. I just looked at a few different ones, and they all say basically the same thing, which is, what I do in this video. There's just different variations and stuff. And some of them did say this would take 3 hours, but I didn't believe them, even though I'm not a good baker, so I should have thought it would take even longer. At this point, I realized I was making too much of a mess getting cake crumbs everywhere, so I grabbed the baking tray that goes along with it to catch the crumbs. Also, I sped this up 2x because it took a while. I had to be precise. But yeah, I definitely ended up making quite the mess with this project. But I'm somebody who cleans as I go, so that helps a lot. Good thing this knife was sharp enough to cut it. So I mainly just worried about the two large faces of the cake. I didn't really bother with getting every last scrap on the other sides, the other edges. And then at this point, I put the KitchenAid mixer over here, and which is really heavy, by the way. And the cake was still hot at this point. It was supposed to be cooled, but I couldn't really wait any longer. So you just start putting the whole cake in the bowl to mix up. Then once all of it's in there, I put the mixer down, locked it, and I put it on the slow setting to start. And it just starts basically breaking up the cake to get crumbly. Once it was all broken up, I got the whipped cream cheese frosting, and you're supposed to add 2 tablespoons to the mix and mix it up until it gets to a doughy texture where it sticks together. Just keep adding frosting until it gets to that texture. So I did 2 heaping tablespoons right into there. Don't ask where the first tablespoon was that was missing from the container. I may or may not have had a bite before. So yeah, I just put all that in there and started mixing it up again slowly. It's pretty fun to watch. This would have been very difficult without the KitchenAid, so even though the recipes were saying to mix it by hand, I don't really see why. So yeah, there it goes, forming it all into one ball over time instead of a bunch of crumbs. It looks very similar to cookie dough, which is probably one of my favorite desserts. was still looking a little too crumbly at that point, so I added 1 more tablespoon of frosting to the mix. Sticky, sticky frosting, sticky, sticky frosting. And started mixing that up. And this really helped it get to the correct texture where it sticks together. So there it is mixing. It's so fun to watch how it moves around. So once I saw that it wasn't sticking to the bowl but was all in one clump, I tested the texture by squishing it, and it definitely was sticking to itself. So I think that means our cake batter or cake pop dough is ready. So we're gonna get this gigantic machine out of the way and just have the bowl left. So there it goes, falling out. But I got a spoon to get everything off the attachment. I learned from how difficult it was to do with a spatula, so a spoon was better. We don't want to waste any. We don't want to waste any. So then you just twist off the attachment. And it's kind of tricky to get the bowl off. You have to really put some pressure. Whoops. Not a flat surface there. And then I just, wind up the cord and put it back where it came from, which is under my counters in a cabinet. But I don't recommend that because it's just so heavy. But if you have the counter space, it's probably better to leave it up there. Now I have a baking tray with that same parchment paper I used to bake the cake with. I'm just reusing it to set my cake balls on. So yeah, basically I just take a little bit of the batter, the dough, and press it together and then roll it up. People say that will help it to not grease, to press it together before, and just make it in a ball. I wasn't particular with the size. I really wasn't going for aesthetics with these. Look how greasy it made my hands. So this took a while to make them all. I think I ended up making 25, maybe. So you can see those are 2 very different sizes, but I also think that's good so you have some variety to choose from, You might not want a big one. And it also changes the ratio of the coating to the cake, so whichever you prefer, you can take. So yeah, I basically just kept doing this, made a bunch of them. I'll skip past that. Once they were all done, I put them in the freezer to chill for a little bit and harden up before we coat them in this candy coating that I showed earlier. After the first minute, it was still really hard. You couldn't cut it up, so I just put it in for longer. You want to do 40-second increments, and just keep doing small increments so that you don't burn it. At that point, it was soft enough to cut into its little cubes, but it definitely was not all the way melted, so I cut it up so that it would melt more evenly all the way across. this is a new piece of parchment paper, fresh one, because this is what they would actually be presented in. And at this point I realized it's better to just put the sprinkles on over the chocolate rather than getting them all loose in the container. So you can see it's dripping down through the fork because there's just so much excess that's hard to get off. So I grabbed a clean spoon to try to help, but the spoon only ends up just as covered as the fork and knife. There was not much method to this madness. I just kept trying my best. But yeah, I just did not realize how big of a difference sticks would make. I was like, oh, who needs a stick, just hold it. But, that's okay. It's still the same food, it just was a lot harder to make. So there I am, kind of like basting it, almost like dumping the coating on from above rather than rolling it in, because the balls were getting like kind of deformed sometimes, like chunks could come out, chunks could come out, chunks could come out. But honestly, that looks kind of cute. It's just so hard to like maneuver these things. So I just kind of repeated this process for as many as I could fit in that one container. Once those were all done, I needed a second container to fit the rest. So I put the lid on that one and put it in the fridge until I would need them the next day for, the occasion, the get together. And then I got a second container and I tried to fit a piece of parchment paper onto the bottom so that it wasn't like way too big and falling on top of the cake ball. So I did the crumple trick, and then it fit really well. And then and during this I put the rest of the cake balls in the freezer so they could re-harden up a little bit, just for another minute or so before I took them out. And just started coating these ones. Here, I do a little zoom in for you. And there, I finally finished. These ones weren't as pretty as the others. I was getting annoyed with the sprinkles. I left one last ball that didn't fit for me to try tonight because the chocolate, or the whatever you want to call it, candy coating, actually hardened super quick. So you don't have to wait overnight. There I am fishing out the dirty knife from the coating. And the spoon and fork at this point are just completely hardened with it, so I just tried my best to coat it. Like you can see, it's way too thick. It's just, too hard to get a thin, even layer, like I said. So, yeah, these don't even need to go in the fridge, they just harden up on their own. Then I put like 3 sprinkles for presentation. And while that hardened, I took off the things on the stove and cleaned up all the crumbs and frosting and sprinkles that had spilled. It's so much better to clean as you go, so it's not like a gigantic task at the end. And I love waking up to a clean house, so I definitely wanted to get done as much as I could before going to sleep. It was finally time to try it. It peeled right off of the parchment paper. It's not the prettiest, but there I take a bite, and it looks like a cake pop. Super thick, uneven coating, which honestly, it was way too sweet, unfortunately, and I have a big sweet tooth, so. But it still tasted good. I enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate